Hi, welcome to It's Not What You Think, episode 35, recorded on June 20th, 2022. Dr. Jessica Fragola practiced veterinary emergency medicine before starting Paws at Peace, an organization in New York City, which is devoted to helping pets transition at the end of their lives. It has become her mission to focus on one of the most important aspects of our pets' well-being, a peaceful passing from this world without pain. I very much enjoyed speaking with her and have a great appreciation for how she helps others in their greatest time of need. It's Not What You Think podcast is available on YouTube and Spotify, so please like, comment, share, or subscribe on your favorite platform. That support's enough to continue to allow us to produce this show. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from yours or mine, so while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. How was your week? How was your weekend? We just finished.
How was my weekend? It was really bad, actually, but that's fine. Things are better now.
Yeah. So I know we'll get into the details, but I just realized you probably are on call 7 days a week.
I am on call 7 days a week, and I try to answer my phone pretty much all the time, but I try to limit how much I work just because it's
right.
It's balance. I want to be able to help as many people as I can, but on the other hand, I need to maintain my sanity so I can continue to work.
You're the only person left in New York that's trying to maintain their sanity. So that's
I think everyone's trying and failing. I don't know if I'm succeeding at it.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, which I haven't recorded yet, you were an emergency room vet before you started Paws at Peace. What was your experience like working in that high stress, really life or death environment with people's loved ones, especially during the pandemic? I mean, stress on top of stress on top of stress. What was that like?
Well, it's interesting. It was, I enjoy it. It's very intellectually stimulating and rewarding. I had been a general practice vet for a while, but you're like, oh, I vaccinated some things. In the ER, you can go home from work every day saying, oh, I saved some lives today. And that's a great feeling. But yeah, it is very high stress, and the pandemic made it more challenging. I'm probably a rare person in my field who thinks that curbside medicine is really bad for animals, because I do believe that the personal connection is really important. A lot of animals had to stay out, come in the hospital while the owners stayed outside, and everyone liked it because then you didn't have to deal with the people as much. And to be honest, it makes the workflow a little bit faster, but there's a lot that's lost when you don't have a face-to-face interaction with somebody. A lot. The trust is lost. And so there's a lot more aggravation, a lot more angry clients, a lot more frustrated veterinarians, because it's amazing. The second someone looks you in the eyes, they're like, oh, I trust you now. But if you're on the phone and they just hear your voice, they don't know who you are. They probably think you're just trying to get their money. They don't really know what's going on. But if I can point to an animal's stomach and say, see how that really hurts there, and this means this, then there's understanding. And our profession has not gone back to pre-pandemic anything because, well, everyone blames the pandemic, but I think mostly it's because vets are very happy not having to talk to clients face to face, because most vets aren't people, they're animal people. So
yeah, you guys didn't get into that career because you love people. You got into the career because you had an affinity or a connection with animals. So it makes total sense.
Exactly. Except we probably work with people more than physicians do, because it's like being a pediatrician. You have to explain things to everybody, and it's
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. So how and when did it click for you to create Paws at Peace?
Well, it partially was, oh, there's my own kitty. It partially was my emergency room experience. I love being in the ER. It's fun. It's exciting. You save lives. You get to think quickly, but you really watch a lot of people. They want to do everything for their pet, and then you offer them everything for their pet, and then they admit their animals to the hospital. The prognosis is terrible, meaning the animal's unlikely to make it. It spends 3 days in the hospital. They spend $20,000 or whatever. And then you're making a call at 2 a.m. telling them their pet passed away in the ICU, surrounded by beeping monitors under fluorescent lights, and it wasn't what was meant to be. Now, sometimes we can really save lives doing those things, but and I know the human side faces this challenge as well. That's just a horrific call to have to make when you have to make that call. And also, we do euthanize a lot of animals in the hospital, and it's really stressful for people to come into the ER and have to euthanize their pets. In a busy environment, there's a loud waiting room, there's dogs barking, there's cats hissing, and they feel rushed. I'm rushed because I have to see tons of patients, and it's really, really sad. And the little bits you can do to make that better for people, I find that people are happier when you give their pet a happy death than when you save their pet's life. They're just, when you tell them it's okay to let go, because that's a lot of it. They don't think it's okay to let go. They don't think they did everything. They're tied up with guilt. Oh, if I only had done this, he would have made it. They feel like they're giving up on somebody they love if they don't keep trying. And if you tell them it's the right thing and it's okay, and that your pets don't care how long they live, they only care that the time that they're here is with their loved ones, you see like relief wash over them. Just like, oh, it's okay, I can let them go. And so I started this because I just felt very rewarded doing that. I just felt really nice doing it. I don't have a better explanation for it. I guess I'm suited to it. Helping people with death.
Yeah, so clearly you're very good at it from my personal experience with you. And I should say that you and I met as a result of a mutual friend of ours whose pet passed away peacefully at the end of her life. And the direction you provided was like hospice for pets. You were there, you were compassionate, knowledgeable, responsive, supportive. He was very lucky to have you there. Can you share any personal experiences with former patients with Paws at Peace? You don't have to mention names, of course. I'm sure in some ways they're all unique, but in some ways I would think there might be a theme that runs through.
Yeah. Well, and despite the fact the patient we're talking about passed away naturally, actually, without my assistance, and she did so peacefully. And so I also, despite the fact that I do euthanasia, you'll find a lot of veterinarians who are kind of against natural death in animals because it's scary and out of their control. As doctors, we want to control things, really want to control things. And when things are starting to die in the ER, everyone's like, quick, get the euthanasia solution. When it's literally in the act of dying, everyone's running at the animal, trying to put IV lines in it, trying to get euthanasia solution in it so we can kill it when it was already dying anyway. And sometimes that might spare them some pain, but I think it's more of a fear response from humans that we feel the need to control the death. And we want to control everything. And it's really hard to cede that control because you don't know. And helping out the patient we're discussing, I didn't know how long she had. Nobody knows. And she decided when she was going to go. And it was a nice death for her. It was a peaceful death. She was at home and surrounded by the people she loved. So that's an interesting one, but I guess, okay, stories. Probably one of the more interesting ones I did is someone had a 200-pound pot-bellied pig in an apartment in the Bronx. And they'd called like 20 vets before they found me, and no one would help their pig because it was a little bit of outside of everybody's. They're like, I don't know what to do with a pig. I'm like, it's not that hard to kill something, like basically you give it drugs until it's, not to belittle it, but it's not like you need to know how to deal with a pig in order to give it euthanasia drugs. So she was really happy when I agreed to come out, and I was nervous about it because pigs usually squeal when you poke them with things. And it actually worked out really nice for the piggy. And he was 12 years old. He spent his summers on a farm in Pennsylvania, and where he foraged for pears and persimmons that fell from the trees of the farm he lived on. He really liked beer. And his family, he lived in this apartment in the Bronx the rest of the year. And his family he had fallen down and couldn't get up. He'd probably herniated a disc in his back or broken his back or a hip. It was unclear, but he couldn't get up, and he'd been lying on the floor for 3 days just in distress.
Oh,
And he
wow.
was a really nice pig. And the owner fed him like 3 quarts of strawberries and 3 Coronas while he just fell asleep. And getting him out of the house was a little bit harder, but it was just really nice. His family loved him. This old man in the house, the woman I had primarily interacted with was like, my dad, he's never going to be able to deal with it. And he was this old Italian man. And it was just, he was so in love with this pig, you know, and the pig just drank beer and fell asleep.
Yeah, I think people have as I'm sure you know, a special or a different kind of, we'll call it unconditional love for their pets that they necessarily can't find with humans. There's, there's just, it's a different relationship completely. And so I think, yeah, when a pet is able to go on its own, and the owner understands that, or even if you've given permission to the owner to let go, I think it can be quite beautiful and touching.
Yeah, and I think that's the letting go part of it. I'd read your book, and there was so much. Oh, there's so many pearls of wisdom in it, and things that I've sort of intuited doing this work, and then you wrote down in a very concise way. Like, I mean, your book opens not just talking about how Westerners fear death, and I just encounter that so much. And that there's certainly some people who are better than death than others, and immigrants from Asia are better at death in general, in my experience, and they're not afraid, like, wealthy white people in New York, and not to stereotype anybody, they're like, we don't even want to be here. We don't want to, after she's gone, just take her away. Take her away. We can't deal with it. And it's very cold, and people are scared. They go at it and they're screaming and crying, and then they're like, just take it away. I can't see it. And it's funny. I don't know. It's a strange thing, and everybody is a little different. I find that people of East Asian descent, oftentimes they really want to, after the pet has passed, spend a lot of time, which is really great, except that sometimes I'm on a schedule and everyone in the family is saying goodbye to the pet for like an hour, and it's such a different thing. And sometimes people want to wash the pet after it passes away. I found some Chinese people want to wash the pet. I don't know what it's about, but you definitely encounter some different cultural interpretations of death. Mm-hmm. And the fear of it. But partly your book spoke to me because it talks about the fear of death, and that it is this beautiful part of life. Like, it really, really is. And once you tell people it's okay, they calm down a lot, and that it's okay and it's natural, and your pet's just passing, and we're ending a really difficult ordeal that you've
Mm-hmm.
been through. And there's a calmness.
So one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you in this venue is I personally became very interested in the death process a few years ago from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective. Some Buddhists believe in rebirth. And what that means is that after our body and our brain is dead, our consciousness lives on until it's reborn in a new baby's body. That's it in a nutshell. There's other details which we don't have to get into. And I was lucky enough to co-author the book you're referring to, which is Tibetan Book of the Dead for Beginners. And one of the roles that the Tibetan Buddhist qualified Lama plays is to guide the deceased during and after they die, so they're likely to have an auspicious rebirth. Because after a sentient being, animal, human dies, the consciousness is still there. That's what we believe. And that's kind of what's happening in those families, whether they can verbalize it or not, the consciousness is still there. The best example, once again, we don't have to get into this level of detail, but, there's a lot of near-death experiences that people have, some large percentage of people on the operating room table that die, about 17% actually come back alive, some huge number. And they tell the story, I was hovering over the bed and I saw you go play golf. And, it's like for hours and sometimes even days, where they then come back and they recount because they were conscious in some way or another. So, and the training many Buddhists do while alive is certain practices so that when it's time to go to die peacefully, they don't grasp, they don't cling, they don't hold on to their past life, they go. And in some ways, you're playing a similar role as these Tibetan lamas. I know you don't see it that way, but that's how I see it, where you're sitting there guiding the pet. How are you guiding? Well, calm, love, allowing the human owner, if they are owners, so to speak, to let go. Because there's only suffering and stress for both the pet and the owner by holding on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I see that all the time, to be honest, like in your book talks about the calming, how important it is to be calm for people. And it just articulates it really well. Not only do I need to be calm, and I am calm, I try to be strong and calm for people, but what I witness is owners sobbing hysterically as their pet's slowly falling asleep, and their pet is actually feeling better and better and better because it just got a bunch of really nice drugs. Right. And then you see the dog getting distressed and comforting the owner because they see their owner crying. And now I want to tell people, be strong for your pet, and I have to walk the line. Like, I'm a trained doctor, not a spiritual guide of any kind, but right. I do find myself inadvertently having to play that role. And in those moments, I sometimes I do sort of advise people to, gently to just be there for her, just pet her, because it helps the pet, regardless of what you believe in an afterlife. In the moment, it helps the pet when the owner is not, distressed, and it's not even a crying necessarily, but there's so many things you project, and then that can really stress the pet out as it's passing away because they perceive the human as stressed. So that really resonated with me, that oh gosh, how can you support the pet in this time? And then how can I support the owners so they can support their pet and have a beautiful passage?
Yeah, for sure. So, and all religions are very, very similar in that regard. There's no religion that says, look, when someone's about to die, make a lot of noise, tell them, no, don't die. This doesn't happen. So in that regard, there's a sensitivity that it's better to die with a sense of calm and let them go. I mean, it's more details in the book, but yeah. So in that regard, it's not a Buddhist thing. Although what makes Tibetan Buddhism different is a lot of our daily practices. I may not die till tomorrow or for another 30 years, but our daily practices incorporate the death process. So in some ways, we use death as an advisor on how to live life. And then when we die, hopefully we're a little bit more prepared. Our mutual friend, he and I discussed about how do we know when it's time for the loved one to die, or for euthanasia, or what have you. And he and I discussed that quite a bit. And I know you talk about that on your website, Paws at Peace. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? How do you know when, or how would someone watching this whose pet is towards the end of life, how do they know when it's time?
Well, I mean, I can give you the sort of general medical advice, but I also have certain non-medical questions about that perhaps you have some insight in, because it's a big burden to make that decision. It's a big burden. And I think, I think there's not always a right answer. There's definitely a lot of medical professionals in my field who think that natural death is wrong, that it's wrong. And if it involves any bodily suffering at all, and inevitably it's going to involve some. But then, sometimes I look at myself and I say, what is my job to make this decision? Is it not like God's job or something to decide when it's time for something to die? Do I have the right to do this? So from a spiritual perspective, at least my rationalization is that, I personally, and I don't know about your audience, I do personally eat animals. I am a meat eater. And I'm like, well, if we can kill perfectly healthy pets to ingest them, then we can alleviate suffering from animals that we love in order to relieve their suffering. But is that right or wrong? I don't really know. So my perspective is that animals, and I don't know what you believe, so I'd be curious to know, they don't have the sort of consciousness that we have. Like, I might personally say, I have cancer. I'm about to have a grandchild. I really want to meet my grandchild before I die. And that's really, really important to me. So I'm going to go through the hell of chemotherapy. I'm going to torture myself because I've made this decision that I want to do everything I can to meet this human that's coming into the world. And I don't know that animals have that perspective. I think their perspective is they're much more in the moment. And I think that goes back to your point of why we love them so much, is they're happy in the moment. They're living day to day. And when their days are no longer good, and that most of their life is suffering, and there's no prospect for their days to improve. It's one thing if an animal is suffering because it's got some sort of tummy thing going on, but 3 days from now, if we treat it, it'll be fine. Or if we fix it, it'll be cured, or at least have a good quality of life. But if we're dealing with diseases where the suffering is immense, and it's not something we have really any realistic prospect of relieving. And while there are, miraculous things that happen sometimes, most of the time you can predict the course of action and you can see the probability, right? I can say, well, we could remove this massive tumor and do chemo, and maybe your dog has a month, and then maybe you don't want to do all those things because you're going to make that month really bad for the animal, or even worse than it otherwise would be. So I usually think when the prospect of the future prospect of a lot of suffering that's not going to have an ending overwhelms the prospect of joy in the animal's life. Because we love our animals because they experience joy when we pet them, we give them love, we feed them. And when they're not experiencing that joy, and that it's unlikely to return, then it's an appropriate consideration. It's not mandatory, I don't think, as long as we can keep the animals comfortable. I don't mandate that people euthanize their animals when they're suffering. There's often things we can do to keep them comfortable and let them pass naturally, but that's kind of my guiding principles. And there's a lot more detail, obviously, like how do you know when an animal is suffering, but and there's checklists you can fill out and criteria, but people will often say, oh, you'll know when it's time. And I disagree with that. It's very difficult to know when it's time because we're wrapped up in our own emotional love of an animal, and there's not always there is not always a right answer about when it's time. There's a lot of subjectivity to it. And a lot of people's cultural beliefs inform their decision about when it's time. Some people are like, he's suffering a little bit, it's time. And other people think, I don't know, there's a lot of difference. And I tend to just respect people's differences with that.
Yeah. So the last, we have a lot of dogs, and the last dog that we had that passed away, I think it was probably two or 3 years ago, was very interesting because the dog, we knew he was on his end. We didn't know if it was today, tomorrow, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but we've been dog owners long enough to know when the time is coming. Yeah. And what this dog did, his name is Eli, he went and lied down on my wife's lap. And then that was it. And then 5-10 minutes later, he just stopped breathing.
Wow.
So, and that was a real interesting teaching for me, because what do most of us do? I don't want to die. We kind of resist, and we, because we're not ready for it, we're not prepared. But animals, I think in general, they know. And they are, and it's time to go. It's time to go. Like you said, they live in the moment. Not that they want to suffer. Of course they don't. But it just felt like he knew it was time, and he just left. It was actually quite interesting.
It's really, really nice. That's a great story.
Yeah, we were very lucky to have that.
Sorry, go on. I also think that animals sometimes, sometimes they go on for us, really go on for us. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many times Animals are doing terribly, but they're there. They still want to greet their owner at the door. They still want to say hi in the morning. I mean, they want to take care of us, to some extent, and do their things. And then the owner goes away for like 3 days, animal dies because it happens too often to be a coincidence. And I think that they're really hanging on because of their love for their owners. And then that person disappears and the stress is just too much for them to live without their owners, especially as pets get older. I think we all get a little more attached to the people we love as we get older. And I mean, you use the word grasp, I guess, in your book a lot, and that's interesting. Cling to, I think we cling to a lot of our worldly attachments, a lot of, and I don't know if animals do, I don't know, but I see that a lot, that they hang on for people. And maybe if you have a different attitude where you're like, it's time, like you go whenever. Your dog Eli felt that and was like, now it's time, Mom. It's time now.
Yeah, it was really quite amazing to see that. So I was talking to the co-author of the book, Lama Lanang, who's also my teacher. It's about a month or two ago, and I asked him about, euthanasia for animals and things, and what does he tell people? Because he gets calls all the time. That's his, I don't want to say that's his specialty, but Tibetan Buddhism is known for, especially the lineage that he's from, is known for a lot of focus on death. So, oh, my dog is dying, my pet, and I had that, he gets that all the time. And so I was asking about that. He goes, well, I don't really believe, this is his belief, I don't believe in euthanasia. I said, really, why not? He goes, well, the animal is a sentient being just like we are, and there's a karma. So it's better from his perspective to let the dog or the cat, whatever, live their life and experience their karma. Then they don't have to experience it again.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but what do you do when the animal's suffering? He goes, well, a lot of that is really projection by the human. Do we know that he's suffering, not suffering? He goes, so he goes, it's his opinion, it's better to reduce the suffering. And I think, which is what you mentioned earlier, which is there's medicine, there's palliative care, things like that. And if it's possible, until the animal is ready to go. Mm-hmm. It's not like the animal is ringing a bell, kill me now, kill me now. It's usually the human that's so concerned, sometimes overly concerned. So I found that interesting, and something that I thought about. It's hard in the moment to do it because you just want things to be over, no suffering, there's so much stress. Let's stop the stress now. But what he's saying from a Buddhist perspective makes sense to me. Let the animal fulfill its karma. And then, but we don't want it suffering, no problem. Then there's medication you can do for that. So I found that fascinating.
That is interesting. That's where I was talked before. I was like, I don't know, am I playing God here? Am I doing something right? I'm sort of living by our sort of contemporary Western medical tradition, how that sort of rubric of what the right thing to do is, because that's my training. Do I really know if it's right? Am I, going to find myself at like the pearly gates and someone saying, no, you can't come in, you killed all those animals. So, and I don't literally mean that, but it's certainly something I think about a lot. And you're right. There are definitely people who project onto their animals with everything. And it works both ways. There's some people who are like, oh, my animal's been fine. And the animal's clearly suffering a lot. And others who are like, they can't even see a moment of their animal being in distress before they're like, I can't deal with this anymore. And
right, they can't deal with it. So I want to talk briefly, something you just mentioned, which you implied karma, when you get to the pearly gates, what's going to happen. And I know you didn't say karma, but I say karma. So from a karmic perspective, it's all based upon motivation. Your motivation is pure. Your motivation is based on compassion. I don't know if it's love, but certainly compassion and a desire to do the right thing for the animal. Yeah. So based from a karmic perspective, I don't want to say it's looked upon, who's looking, but that's how karma works. So I wouldn't worry about it from that perspective. Just a little.
That's good to know. And that was in your book. I really enjoyed that in your book too, talking about that it's like a lot about your intentions than
exactly.
more about exactly what you're doing. And it goes back to your point of all religions being really the same. When I started this business, I was rummaging through my mom's drawers and I found this little mass card. It was Prayer to St.
Oh,
Francis. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
mhm.
Now I'm blanking because I'm on the spot, but I like say it to myself when I'm thinking it's just about, it's about, gosh, I'm blanking because I'm on the spot. So, oh, it's Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, joy. And where there is sadness, joy. I'm fucking it up, but anyway, sorry to use expletives on your podcast. But
By the way,
it's
we don't
all
edit. We don't
about,
edit
it
anything.
sounds
It's okay.
just like your description of karma from your book, where it's all about giving and love and not taking. And I thought that was really nice. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
So
found that when I started this business, and now when I'm like sitting there waiting for animals to fall asleep, if I'm a little stressed, I say that to myself.
right.
And it really helps me be present, and
Yeah.
focus on the good.
Yeah. That's a beautiful, beautiful practice. And that, once, confirms for me for the millionth time that at the end of the day, we're really all very similar. Yeah, I believe in this in Buddhism, and you're Christian and Jewish, and I've interviewed rabbi and imams and that. At the end of the day, there's a point in the conversation where it's just so clearly apparent that we're all the same. We all have the same, view in terms of the importance of either being in the moment or love or compassion, or it's all about intention, motivation, that type of thing. So yeah, that's a beautiful practice. You have to do that because what I believe is not only does it help you, but that energy gets projected and whoever is in the room can benefit from that. So like I said, there's very little difference in that regard between you and some of the high Tibetan lamas that in terms of what they do. So speaking of which, so what do you believe personally in terms of where the pets, their spirit or their soul? Some people believe, hey, when they're dead, and I respect that. Others believe there's rebirth. Some people, oh, the soul, heaven, hell. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a question that I've been interested in since I was a little kid, and I've never really come to a conclusion. Really bad when they ask me. Um, I don't know. I was personally raised a Catholic. I'm not practicing. I rejected Christianity like when I was like 8 years old. Despite the fact that I love this poem by St. Francis, I believe that religion has more to offer than I did then. But I don't know. But I researched a lot of religion when I was in high school. When I was in college, I actually went to a Zen Buddhist place regularly for
Wow.
my freshman year before I got into drinking and partying and
Okay.
decided that I was
When you
going
were
to
sober,
be a college kid. So, and I read a lot of Alan Watts in
of course.
high school and really liked his writings. But then I got away from religion entirely for a very long time. And the pandemic made it more interested in the spiritual side of life, actually. And I reread the Bible and I was like, whoa, this is a lot better than I thought it was when I was a kid. And so, I don't really have any particular beliefs, but I do like the wisdom that religion has to offer about what truth is and what goodness is and what beauty is, and that doesn't necessarily have to do with the sensory experiences of the material world that we live in. So I don't know.
So when the animal passes, do you perform or say any kind of prayer, or just say, hey, or just sit quietly, or either to yourself or to the owner?
Sometimes the owners will read a prayer, or I've had someone had shaman be present. I've had someone have a rabbi be present. Everyone's a little different. Some people want it to be very clinical and just done with, and other people read poetry. Some people have written poetry,
Wow. Mhm.
sing songs. I just kind of try to read the crowd and do what people want. Sometimes people want me right there with them, and other times I'm like, I'm going to give you some privacy and take a step back and just sort of sit calmly and try to be a calm presence. And sometimes people want me to participate. So I don't have anything I really do. Usually I just try to be quiet and calm and
Right.
channel the sort of energy that your book talks about, and just be there for people. And because things happen in the death process that you can't always predict. I want it to go smoothly and the pet just falls asleep and passes away, but it doesn't always. Like sometimes there's weird breathing. Sometimes when you witness death a lot, different things happen, even when it's a good death.
Sure.
And so, just try to help them through those moments as well and prepare them as best as I can that this might happen or that might happen. And then that's okay. It's okay if these things happen. It's not bad.
And also, I think, like you said earlier, you're not there as their spiritual advisor. You're there to take care of the pet and make sure that the transition and the passing is done with love and compassion and efficiently and all that other stuff. And that's really what your focus is. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's my focus, but also I find myself inadvertently taking on this role that I enjoy actually, and I really would love to learn. Like your book was great. I really would love to learn more about death practices in different cultures because there's so much to offer, and the more I can help my clients with, the transition to whatever is beyond is it would be really cool. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I had a pet. Oh gosh, you're asking about different experiences. I had a pet recently that was literally basically dead. It had fallen asleep really, really nicely and gotten to this place where its heartbeat was slow, it was barely breathing. And I'd never seen anything like this before because it was so deep under anesthesia, it was basically dead. It sat up and started barking and then died. And the owner was so upset about it. And, it just, I didn't have an explanation for it. And the dog was troubled. It was partially getting euthanized for severe anxiety. And it had this terrible seizure disorder and all day, all night was a really anxious dog. And the owner said that was her screaming that she didn't want to go. She didn't want to go. And that euthanasia maybe was the wrong decision for her. And I said, well, that might be a manifestation of, what was wrong in your animal's brain that was causing her to have this terrible, terrible constant anxiety, fearful of everything. The dog was just so fearful all the time. So I don't know what you think of that, what this death scream.
I mean, I don't have your experience. I have other experience. And it sounds like you handled it perfectly. Not every death is going to be, chocolates and roses. And you can create the most incredible environment, calm, peaceful music, candles, poetry, someone come and play guitar. You can do all that. But at the end of the day, how we die is based upon how we've lived our lives. So if I'm an angry person, if I'm irritable, I'm always annoyed, and things don't take much to get me annoyed, then guess what? When something doesn't go my way and I'm about to die, that's just my operating system. That's kind of, unfortunately, that's what's in place. And then of course, we believe that how you die is now how you're going to go into the afterlife. The afterlife is how you go into the next life, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is the owner recognized that bark and said, oh, that's the bark that my dog uses when he or she is anxious or irritated or annoyed. And now is unfortunately, her last words.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I would believe is happening. Not clear to me that I would say that to the owner.
Yeah, well, I know because I was thinking about that because it was around the time that we were talking, I think it was like a month ago, about how important it was for calmness to surround death as far as karma and what happens next. I'm like, does this mean this dog has really bad karma?
I want to add two more important things, though. Two things. One is one of our dogs who we adopted was abused clearly when we got him, and we've been working with him, and now he's wonderful. But he still on occasion will voice something. And initially we took it as negative, but then we started to realize he's actually just trying to communicate. Just because a dog makes a little guttural sound doesn't mean he's, I'm going to growl before I bite you. He's just saying, hey, I don't like that, or I like this, or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with that. The second thing is, even if what I said and what you said is true, the game is not over when the dog dies. Once again, this is from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective. The consciousness is still there. So you know what? I think you could, in theory, you could say, what I believe, obviously you'd have to feel comfortable saying this, is that the dog's consciousness is still here. So you can still communicate with the dog silently, through your love, through your compassion, through your, it's okay, little Joey, it's okay, it's time for you to go. You're going to make another family very, very happy. This is a good thing. This is part of life, Joey. This is, and we're doing this now, not just for the awareness and consciousness of the dog, Joey, because I believe that Joey's still in the room, but it also helped the owner to move forward. So just because God forbid, my mother died, doesn't mean I can't communicate with her. Certainly, I believe until she's, until she goes further into the afterlife.
Very cool. And I guess also the, whatever happens next, if the dog is in a new body or something, that's not the end, it has another, its consciousness has another opportunity at life again, whatever happened to this little dog, it made me sad to think the dog was fated to such a difficult existence.
Right. So I think you can use that, of course, with any opportunity where someone feels like, yes, in some ways, death is very final. We know that. The brain, the body, dead is dead, as Billy Crystal says in The Princess Bride. Don't know if you saw that movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Yeah. Well, I actually quote that a lot when, they talk about, he's mostly dead. I'm like,
exactly.
I see this all the time. I'm like, he's mostly dead. He's not dead. He's mostly dead. I see a lot of different levels of death, and I'm like, it's very accurate.
Right. Mostly dead is not all dead, So, yeah, but once again, and by the way, in Judaism, the dead body will sit in not really a morgue, but maybe it's a Jewish morgue, where someone will sit there with the body for 7 days and recite prayers. So, this is not just about Buddhism. This is about almost all religions believe there is something that continues on.
Yeah.
And actually in Hebrew, it's called the shomer, which is someone who watches over that, not watching the body per se. It could be the spirit, and they're reciting the different psalms. So this is not this is not coming out of left field, and so you can use that when if someone feels bereft, they didn't get a chance to say the right kind of goodbye. They're concerned that the dog or the pet left and was still unsettled, which may be true, but you can still settle things for yourself, not so much by holding on to the dog, but by saying it's time to go. It's be a very positive thing to let them go.
Yeah.
Gesundheit.
Yeah. No, it was difficult. I struggled with that one for that reason. And I wondered if there was something else I could have done differently to make it better for the dog and for the owner, because she had a lot of guilt about it. The dog was just having intractable seizures, like 10 seizures a day.
How long ago was this?
Probably it was around the time that I first spoke to you, probably a month or two ago. And, and it had this weird reaction at the moment, literally the moment of death. The dog hadn't shown a sign of consciousness in 15 minutes. And boom, right before it died, it did this.
Some humans do some similar things in that regard, where they'll have maybe a moment or more than a few moments where they'll become very alive and very alert and very clear. They may not see you in the room. They may see other things going on in the room, non-physical, but they'll have that and then they'll pass. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but
Yeah.
it's not surprising. It might be similar in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting though.
Yeah. So, so last question for you. You've been doing this now, I'm guessing 6, 7, no, maybe probably 6 months or so. Actually, you probably did it even while you were at the emergency room as well. How do you provide your services today differently than when you first started? Like, oh, I learned this, I learned that. Now I do it this. Oh, I would never do, that kind of thing. I'm sure things evolve over time.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And yeah, I've been doing euthanasia for as long as I've been a veterinarian, which is almost 13 years now.
Okay.
But I and I always tried to do a good job for people, not rush them, help them go through it. But I have sort of like just intuitively, and it's more subconscious stuff, is like help walk people through it, and really like not physically hold their hand, although I do hug my clients a lot, and they hug me a lot, but just sort of like there's just so much fear when I walk into someone's apartment or house. Like there's just that it's palpable. Like today I went and euthanized a dog, and the owner was like, "Oh, she's been so anxious all morning. I don't know what's going on." And it's because the owner had been so anxious all morning. And dog comes out to see me, and I'm like, "Hey there, puppy." I was really happy. The dog was actually really happy to see me. But it was a bulldog. Every time it got excited, it was having these horrific breathing issues.
Sure.
So it, so we calmed the dog down, gave it treats, and it was very food motivated. So I try to, first of all, I have a way. In the beginning, I was saying, oh, we can do it this way or that way. And I gave people a lot of choices about how to walk through this. And I found that actually stressed people out when I gave people choices. I'm like,
Right.
well, you can do this over here or over there, or you can say this or that. And then people don't want choices. They want you to tell them what to do and guide them through it. And I'm like, so I've gotten a little bit more structured in my approach and try to just orchestrate it a little bit more. And I find that people are a little bit less stressed out. They're like, where should we do it? And I'm like, your dog looks really happy right there on the kitchen floor. Like it's, oh yeah, she's been spending the last 6 weeks there. I'm like, then we shouldn't move her from the kitchen floor. Like that's where she wants to be. And then they get down on the floor and I tell them exactly what's going to happen, all the things that could happen that could scare them during the process. And then we go. Whereas in the beginning, they want to do it on the bed, and then they take the dog over to the bed. The dog jumps off the bed. They take the dog over to the bed. It jumps off the bed. They take the dog, and it just happens over and over. And I'm like, well, your dog wants to walk around. Why don't we let it walk around? It's fine. You can walk around. But I just really kind of walk people through it more. And I used to tell people to tell me. I give a second injection that's an overdose of anesthesia. And I used to tell people, well, tell me when you're ready. That's like the worst thing ever, because then people are never ready and they're really stressed that you're asking that question, and then you're forcing them to tell you when to kill their dog. And instead, I tell people, I'll tell you when it's ready. If you need more time, just let me know. That way they don't feel like they're being the one to pull the trigger, because there's a lot of that guilt and stuff. So
Right.
the other thing I find is how some people want to help with care of the body afterwards, and some people don't want to have anything to do with it. Somewhat there's a male-female divide in that. Most men want to help me carry the dog or cat, and they often want to take it to my car like they're pallbearers. But it's a little bit different, But mostly I really guide people through it more now than I used to. I don't give them any.
I find that fascinating. We're happy to pet our dogs, when they're alive, but the moment they die, we have this reaction. It's probably true of human death as well. But I think that's just part of our Western culture, unfortunately.
Yeah. When my grandpa died, I remember I was maybe 15 or 14, and it was an open casket wake. And I was like, I'm not going. I was a belligerent teenager, and I was like, I'm not going. And my mom made me go. And I'm so glad now that she made me go. And she made me go to his casket and look at him and say some words, because it was something that was really important to have to face. I really do think people often ask me if children should be present. I don't tell people what to do. I'm not going to get involved in their
Right.
parenting, but I do tell them that I think it is a really beautiful and special way sometimes for children to learn about death, and that death is just a part of life, and it's something that we have to face, and it's something good and not bad and evil. It's just a part of life. And I think that facing death when you're younger is actually helpful in terms of processing it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Unfortunately, I think TV and our culture disagrees with us. Death is presented as something bad, so much violence as well. So that doesn't help matter. So it's definitely presented as something negative. But yeah, so I think that's great advice. And then at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do anyways, and that's fine.
Ask me a lot, and I think most people think that's the case, but people can do what they want with their kids. It's
Right.
fine.
Yeah. It's their life. It's their pet. It's their family. So did you have any experiences growing up that kind of led you down this path? I mean, you did choose to go to veterinary school, or did it just kind of evolve over, as an emergency room doctor, that, gee, this is something that people really need. I'm good at it. I should really spend more time doing this on my own, get out of the rat race of the emergency room situation. I found myself being called in some ways to investigate and the death process.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of both. I think I wanted to get out of the rat race a little bit, but also I really enjoyed doing euthanasias, which is a really strange thing. Like, I really enjoy helping people with death, and I've tried to personally try to figure that out. Like, what about me do I enjoy this? And other people actually enjoy the experience of working with me in this process. Do I have something? And I'm not sure, I don't think any more than anyone else, but I feel like I've experienced a lot of grief and sadness in my life. And it's really, really hard to deal with when you're alone, and helping other people with that. At first, when I started this business, I'm like, am I just going to be depressed all the time? Am I going to be able to handle euthanizing 15, 20 animals a week, or am I going to go crazy? And somehow the experience is like recharging for me to help me with death. Like, I leave appointments and sometimes I cry, but I feel better. Like, I personally feel good. And it comes back to, I don't know, that karma stuff, that prayer of St. Francis, that like helping feels really good, and in a weird way brings me joy, and helps me deal with my own sadness, which I have a good bit of. And somehow I don't know, it's really strange. I can't explain it. And that's how I rationalize it, that it helps me with my own sadness. But I also see, it's palpable how much it helps people, and that's just a really nice feeling. It's just a really nice feeling to help people. And like, people will look at me almost angrily, like in appointments, they'll say, how do you do this all the time? And they'll make really serious eye contact, and there'll be anger in their eyes, like not at me, just with what's going on, because they're so angry about losing their animal.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell them, that of all the things I do, we can save lives. It's so easy to save lives, but letting go is it's a magical thing. There's something magical about it. And just saying it's okay, it like a waves of relief wash over people when you tell them it's okay to die. And it's a really nice thing.
And I think very few people do what you do well, which is to lead someone through a very difficult situation, the most difficult probably that people will encounter, with compassion, with guidance, with science behind it. And that's not something that you just like, oh yeah, I took the course in compassion when I was in school. It's not like that. So it's really, I don't want to call it a skill, or it's a skill and art and all combined, but it's very unusual to have that. I remember when my mother passed, a long time ago, and we had hospice come in, And I look at you the same way I look at hospice, which is just incredible love and compassion. They were here for her. They made it easier for us. They walked us through something we didn't know anything about, and they made her passing quite beautiful.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
so that's kind of what you do. You and you and the hospice worker and the Tibetan Lama all wrapped in one.
Hospice workers are amazing. I remember when I was younger, like a teenager, meeting someone who did that, and I was like, why would anyone want to do that? That sounds horrible. Because I didn't understand. I had a very more naive, like fearful view of death, and like it was something creepy and to be scared of. And when you realize that you're helping, I mean, I can save a million lives in the ER, but like I feel like I'm helping people more doing this. I don't know why, but I just do.
Yeah,
Um,
good, wonderful, good. It's been wonderful having you on the podcast.
yeah, that was really fun.
We overcame our technical difficulties by turning it off, turning it back on. I'm glad I had the opportunity to speak with you again. I know we spoke about a month ago very briefly. Thank you for your patience, your kindness, your compassion in the work that you do. I know it helps a lot of people. I know it helps their pets. So on behalf of the universe, I want to say thank you.
Thank you too. And thank you so much for the copy of your book. I've actually
Okay,
told a lot of people about this book.
great.
So I think it's full of wisdom, and it's a good combination of clarity. It's easy to read, but also like full of wisdom as well. So
Wonderful.
thank
Thank you. Thanks for the commercial. Paws
you.
at peace, everyone. If you're interested or have the need, Dr. Jessica Fragola. Thank you again. Very nice seeing you again.
You too. Take care.
All right. Take care. Be well. I hope you enjoyed our talk today with Dr. Jessica Fragola. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mortylevine@gmail.com, or visit mortylevine.com. And remember, it's not what you think.